Chapter 5. In Genesis 6 verses 11 to 21, the Bible describes a time when the earth had become thoroughly corrupt and violent in God's eyes. Humanity had strayed so far from righteousness that God decided to bring an end to all living creatures. He revealed his plan to Noah, a man who had found favor with him, and instructed him to build a massive ark from cypress wood. The ark was to be coated with pitch inside and out and constructed with precise dimensions: 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. It was to have a roof with an opening beneath it, a side door, and 3 levels: lower, middle, and upper decks. God told Noah that he would send a flood to wipe out every creature that breathed life, but he would establish a covenant with Noah, preserving him and his family. Along with his wife, sons, and daughters-in-law, Noah was to bring 2 of every kind of animal, male and female, into the ark, as well as gather enough food for both humans and animals to survive. Modern evidence presented by geologist Dr. Andrew A. Snelling lends scientific support to the historicity of such a flood. Fossils, he argues, are among the strongest indicators. Strikingly, marine fossils such as fish, corals, and clams are not primarily found on the seafloor where they once lived, but are instead discovered in sedimentary rocks across continents, and even atop some of the world's highest mountains. For example, ammonite fossils, coiled-shelled marine creatures, have been found in limestone layers near the summit of Mount Everest. This suggests that those layers were deposited by ocean waters that once covered vast land areas, and only later were they uplifted into mountains. Similarly, the Grand Canyon's Redwall limestone, sitting nearly 3,000 feet above sea level, is filled with fossilized marine life, including crinoids, trilobites, and brachiopods. These fossils appear jumbled and broken apart, suggesting they were rapidly and violently buried, not gently settled over time. In other cases, vast fossil graveyards are found, such as one in Arizona where billions of nautiloids lie entombed alongside other marine creatures in a sediment layer stretching over 10,000 square miles. Another graveyard in France shows land and sea creatures buried together, marine animals mixed with reptiles, spiders, and insects, pointing to a sudden sweeping catastrophe that engulfed both ocean and land life. Many of these fossils are incredibly well preserved, even down to the fine details of fish fins or trilobite eyes, indicating rapid burial before decay could occur. The rock layers themselves tell a similar story. Sedimentary strata from the supposed time of the flood span entire continents and show signs of having been laid down quickly. In places like the Tapeats sandstone, massive boulders and sand deposits appear to have been violently torn from underlying rock and distributed by powerful water flows, which cannot be explained by slow, gradual processes. Furthermore, if these layers had taken millions of years to accumulate, they would show signs of erosion between them: weathered surfaces, topographic irregularities, and gaps in the geologic record. Yet what is found instead are flat, smooth transitions between layers, suggesting they were laid in rapid succession with little to no interruption. Even the folds in these sedimentary rocks provide key evidence. Hardened rock normally breaks when bent, yet many of these folded layers show no signs of fracturing. This implies they were still soft and pliable when deformed, consistent with rapid deposition and uplift while the sediments were still wet. The lack of mineral changes from high pressure or heat further undermines the idea that the folding happened slowly over time. Altogether, the biblical account of a global flood is echoed by multiple strands of scientific observation, from marine fossils on mountaintops to continent-wide rock layers and the rapid, catastrophic burial of billions of creatures. Far from being a mere myth, the Genesis flood finds resonance in the very stones beneath our feet. Another compelling line of evidence supporting the biblical account of a global flood lies in human genetics, specifically mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA, which is passed down exclusively through mothers. Each human inherits this unique strand of genetic code from their mother's egg cell. Though small, mtDNA contains 16,569 base pairs: adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine, essential for basic cellular functions. Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson, a Bible-believing molecular biologist, conducted research using publicly available human mitochondrial genome data. He wanted to understand how genetic differences in mtDNA arose among various people groups around the world. His assumption was rooted in the Genesis narrative, that God created a perfect mtDNA sequence in Eve, and mutations only began after the fall, roughly 6,000 years ago. With modern mutation rates, about 1 mutation every 6 generations, this timeline would result in only a few dozen changes. Jeanson's analysis, published in Answers Research Journal, revealed that the current number of mtDNA differences among humans aligns precisely with the number expected if humanity began 6,000 years ago. Notably, the data showed none of the 200,000 years worth of mutations that evolutionary models would predict. Using genetic software, scientists construct family trees of mtDNA by grouping similar sequences together. Jensen discovered a striking pattern. The mtDNA tree had 3 primary branches, or trunks, each with only slight variations from the others. These may represent the distinct mtDNA lineages of the wives of Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. A second pattern strengthened this interpretation. According to the Bible, human lifespans were longer before the flood, and the mutation rate was slow. Between Adam and Noah, about 1,656 years passed, enough time for only minimal genetic changes. This explains the short genetic distances between the 3 trunks. In contrast, the 4,365 years from the flood to today would have allowed more mutations, producing the longer branches radiating outward from each trunk. In Jensen's words, the ratio of pre-flood to post-flood time is about 2.6 to 1, and the length of genetic branches mirrors that same proportion. Short for early mutations, long for recent ones. His findings beautifully echo the biblical account. So Noah went out, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him. Together, these patterns point to 2 remarkable conclusions. First, all modern humans appear to descend from 3 maternal lines, just as Genesis describes. Second, the number of mtDNA mutations observed today fits perfectly within a 6,000-year framework. Once again, modern genetics seems to confirm the story found in Genesis. Chapter 6. One of the most remarkable events in biblical history is the Exodus, the deliverance of the Jewish people from slavery in Egypt. But first, who were the Jews? They were the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham, introduced in Genesis 12 verses 1 to 3, was the first to enter into a covenant with God. This covenant passed to his son Isaac, Genesis 17 verse 19, and then to Isaac's son Jacob, later called Israel, whose 12 sons became the founders of the 12 tribes of Israel. Over time, these 12 tribes settled in Egypt and eventually became enslaved. According to Exodus 12 verses 40 to 41, the Israelites lived in Egypt for 430 years. When that time was fulfilled, God acted. As written in Exodus 3 verses 7 to 8, God heard their suffering and promised to rescue them and bring them into a rich, spacious land, through a series of miraculous plagues, culminating in the final plague that established the Jewish holiday of Passover. God compelled Pharaoh, likely Ramesses II, to let them go. After their release, the Israelites spent 40 years in the wilderness, during which God gave them his law. This era remains foundational to both Jewish and Christian traditions. Curious about historical support for this story, I explored archaeological evidence, particularly a list compiled by Steve Law of Patterns of Evidence. The first artifact on the list is the Merneptah stele, discovered in 1896. Dated to around 1208 BC, it boasts of Pharaoh Merneptah's victories and includes the earliest known reference to Israel as a people already living in Canaan, consistent with the biblical timeline. Another key discovery was a Syrian-style house unearthed at the ancient site of Avaris in Egypt's Nile Delta by Manfred Byatak. This house, typical of Semitic peoples, was part of a larger settlement believed to have originated from Canaan. These findings align with the biblical account of Jacob's family migrating to Egypt during a famine and settling in fertile grazing land given by Pharaoh. The Brooklyn Papyrus, an Egyptian slave list, also supports the presence of Semitic populations in Egypt. Many of the names listed, such as Shifra, Asher, and Issachar, mirror those found in the Bible. While written records from the Delta have been lost due to flooding, this document from southern Egypt provides compelling support. Additionally, the Apura Papyrus describes a time of catastrophe in Egypt, echoing themes from Exodus. Rivers turning to blood, widespread death, darkness, and social upheaval. It even mentions slaves taking valuables, reminiscent of the Israelites leaving with gold and silver given by the Egyptians. Finally, evidence from Jericho, the first city conquered after the Exodus, further supports the biblical narrative. Archaeologists found that the city's massive walls had collapsed outward, an unusual pattern in siege warfare, creating a path into the city. A thick layer of ash and burned debris suggests a sudden and intense destruction, just as the Bible describes. The presence of full grain jars also points to a brief siege right after harvest, matching the timing of the Passover. Taking all this into account, I find it reasonable to believe that the Israelites were indeed in Egypt, that they were enslaved, and that they left under extraordinary circumstances. The archaeological evidence also supports their entrance into the Promised Land, including the dramatic fall of Jericho. So far, the historical record aligns closely with the biblical account.